John Arezzi was an integral name in the steroid scandal reporting in 92 and 93, and inadvertently gave Vince Russo his entry into the world of professional wrestling.
Oh, so that's
Because,
who to blame.
well, here's what happened. John was one of the first guys to do Fan Fest. He could the big conventions that he did in New York. One year he had Ric Flair and Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, and Nick Bockwinkel in the same room at the same time. I attended a couple of them, got incredible amounts of old rare merchandise there. But nevertheless, he did Weekend of Champions, is what he would call them, these big conventions in New York City in, I believe, like 90 and 91, 92, that era. And he also had a radio show on a radio station out of Long Island. I believe it's called Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And he was doing somewhat legitimate reporting on wrestling and happenings and interviews and things. And especially when the steroid thing hit with Vince, he was starting to report as a legitimate journalist on what was going on. But the story was told to me, as they say, a wrestling mark that he knew that had a video store named Vince
Oh.
Russo wanted to sponsor the program. And so he became a sponsor, and that's when he was allowed to. I don't know whether first he was Vic Venom or I think he was Vicious Vincent, the World of Wrestling or some or whatever the fuck. But he gets on radio and talk, and he's a mark, and he's allowed to talk about wrestling and have a gimmick like he's a heel because he's sponsoring the guy's radio show. But then he says, well, why in the world would we be critical of Vince McMahon and the steroid scandal? Why don't we suck up to the WWF and we'll get a bunch of their guests and they'll be on our show and then I'll get to pal around with a bunch of big stars, basically, is what his deal was. So he bails on Arezzi and goes over and sucks up to fucking the McMahon side of things and pulls his money. So Arezzi, I think his program ended up off the air for a while. I don't know if that was it for good. And Russo sucks up to the WWF so that he can pal around with stars and, have carry their jocks and have thrills that way. And that was his entree into professional wrestling. But John, I actually saw in Orlando at a TNA show. He stopped by. He was doing very well, looked good, actually was in a real business, Pinocchio. And this was several years ago when I was there and looked very good, but I don't blame him for what he spawned. Only he could not have known at the time what responsibility he had taken on the wrestling world in general.